Can you hear me, Dan?
Yep.
Okay. Everybody else appears muted.
Going to try this from home tonight.
There you go.
I am here.
Can you hear me, Lowell?
Barely.
Can you hear me now,
Jackie
Lowell?
is just joining now.
Yes, I can hear you now. Have we taken roll?
No,
Okay.
Everybody's here, Lowell. I can see everybody, so everybody's here.
Okay.
I don't see everyone.
yeah, we have a lot of participants today, so it depends, I guess, on the grid layout. Right now, we have, I think, 30 participants. So that will have an impact on who you can see.
Let's see. Are you in grid view, Dan?
I am now.
You can make your viewing thing bigger by going to the bottom corner on the right or the left. All right, are we ready to begin?
Is the clerk ready?
Yes, I'm ready. Good evening,
there you go.
everybody.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good
I
evening.
would like to call this meeting of the Rockingham County School Board to order for Monday, May the 11th, 2020. Mr. Superintendent, you need to introduce the virtual board meeting.
Let me quickly share that screen so that the public can look at the scoreboard. And here we go. So I recommend that the board meeting be held electronically due to safety concerns and in accordance with the March 25, 2020 emergency ordinance enacted by the Board of Supervisors of Rockingham County, Virginia.
We have a recommendation by the superintendent. May I have a motion to that effect?
I move that we accept the superintendent's recommendation that the board meeting be held electronically due to safety concerns in accordance with the March 25th, 2020 emergency ordinance enacted by the Board of Supervisors of Rockingham County, Virginia.
It's been moved. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. McQuilkin. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please cast your vote.
I'm not getting my, here we go. Sorry.
It still appears to be waiting on you, Mr. Breeden. Do you want me to
Well, yes,
Manually
I
mark your
vote aye,
vote?
Madam. Yes, if you would, please. I'm
Thank
having
you.
some difficulty recapturing my board docs.
No problem. Okay, we have taken the vote. I'm saving it, and you should see the vote recorded as 5-0 approved.
The motion passes. We will now move into virtual board meeting officially. We need to approve the agenda for this evening's meeting. May I have a motion for approval?
Move that we approve the agenda as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Breeden. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on tonight's agenda? Hearing none, please cast your vote.
Madam Clerk, I vote aye. I'm still having some difficulty with that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Breeden. It's unanimous.
All right. Next item on the agenda is Pledge of Allegiance, and look at that, we have a flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag
To
the flag
of the United
the
States of
United
America
States of
United
America,
States of America,
And to
and
the
to the
republic
republic
for which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under God,
under God,
under God,
indivisible,
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 liberty
indivisible,
liberty and
liberty
justice
and
for
justice
all.
for all.
for all.
for all.
That slight delay really throws the timing off.
Doesn't it
It
though?
does when you try to synchronize your voices. At least we don't have to sing a song in
Yes.
unison.
Oh, my goodness.
A cappella.
Right.
Would you please join me for a moment of silence? Thank you. Next item is public comments.
As we did in past virtual board meetings, we solicited public comments from people who wanted to submit a comment via a Google form. And so it generates a spreadsheet, and I will read the comments. So this time we have one comment, and the person who posted it is Drew Williams. And the comment is as follows. Dear members of the board and Dr. Scheichel, we want to thank you for your decision to delay the pilot program for staggered school days in the TA district for the 2020-2021 school year. We believe this was the right choice given our current public health circumstances causing a shortened 2019-2020 school year and the need for more inclusivity in the decision-making process. Hitting the pause button ensures more input from parents and other stakeholders can be received to ensure this program is successful for our children's education and the community as a whole. As planning work will continue for potential implementation in academic year 2021-22, we look forward to opportunities to work collaboratively in the coming weeks and months. Working together, we can create an innovative program that serves as a model for other school systems. We greatly appreciate the hard work of all our teachers, staff, administration, and board is doing during this unparalleled time in our education system's history. Stay well and safe. And then it's signed Amber Ham, Rob Ham, Dr. Joe Harsh, Dr. Tanya Thornton, Sarah Tranum, and Drew Williams. And that is the only comment we received.
Okay. Thank you. And thank you for the folks who sent a message. Next on the agenda is highlights by board members. I would like to call on Ms. Lohr.
I have no highlights at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. McQuilkin.
Actually, Mr. Falk, I think that I'd like to call everybody's attention to today's DNR. And in the first section on page 6, there's a listing of the students who received the Code of Ethics Award from the Harrisonburg Rotary Club. And it's a nice looking group of individuals, but most important, they were selected because of their integrity and their character, their caring, their citizenship, their fairness, their respect, their responsibility, and their trustworthiness. And we applaud the students who were selected for this award. And we thank the Harrisonburg Rotary Club for sponsoring this grand event annually.
Thank you, Dr. McQuilkin.
Were you able to
Ms.
hear
Reed.
that? Mhm.
Yes.
Mhm.
I was. Ms. Reed?
Thank you, Mr. Falk. It looks like we have a lot of guests here tonight. That's always nice to see. My entire screen is full. I think Ms. Shomo and Ms. Lapira are going to make a presentation to us, so I'm not going to steal their thunder. It is a special month. We've had a lot of people that have needed to be honored this month, and what I would say to our audience is as you go about your business or you send emails or have thoughts, please send an email message to a teacher or a custodian or a administrator or one of our nurses in our schools or one of our cafeteria workers, and let them know, even our bus drivers too, let them know how much we appreciate the work they're doing. There's still, even though the children aren't in school, there's a lot of work being done in Rockingham County and a lot of meetings and a lot of planning and thoughts about what the future is going to hold for us. And that takes a lot of time. So there's a lot of work going on, and I just appreciate what everybody's doing. So thank you, Mr. Falk.
Thank you. Mr. Breeden?
It's just good to see all of you. I hope that you and all your families are safe and well, and hope before too long that we can start to do this again in person. But thanks to everybody out there that's working so hard on the front lines, and those educators that are still at work. And it's a trying time, but folks are doing a real nice job. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mr. Breeden. Dr. Scheichel?
I think the main highlight from my perspective is what will happen here in a few minutes. It's certainly always a special day and a special evening when we honor the Teachers of the Year from the various buildings and then announce the RCPS Teacher of the Year. As was already mentioned, we've also had celebrations of food service staff, who work on the front line serving our families even during this pandemic. We've recognized, other staff member groups, administrative assistants. And so our educators, are the highlight of this evening. And so I'm certainly looking forward to the presentation by Refi.
Thank you. Moving into information items portion of the agenda. First up is Refi Teachers of the Year.
So it's my honor tonight to introduce Susie Shomo, the president of the Rockingham Educational Foundation, who will present the Teacher of the Year. But before we get to that, I want to introduce the teachers that won this award at the individual schools. And so what I will share with you here in a moment is a page that the Educational Foundation has put together. And as you know, we typically have this celebration at the Sims Center. And I think it's very fitting, again, under these circumstances, to have the award named after Lucy Sims, an educator who worked against great odds and became a beloved educator in the community, despite the fact that she had lots of challenges to overcome, and then was known, just like the educators you hear about today, as someone with high expectations, but also with a great level of compassion. And so before we go to the presentation of those teachers, I do want to share with you an image from an upcoming book that was in part made possible, to a large extent made possible by Doug Gwynn, who has also worked with our schools to provide displays. And he is also, of course, part every year of the celebration in terms of the sponsorship of the Teacher of the Year awards. But Ms. Shoma will talk a little bit more about that. But I wanted to let you know that this book is slated to come out in the fall. And so this is just a brief preview of that. And without further ado, I will introduce the Teachers of the Year. And I will go by school and then let you know who earned that honor. Again, those teachers are posted on the REFI website at refigivesback.org. From Broadway High School, we have Herb Hafeditz, Korean technical education teacher. From Cub Run Elementary School, Megan Morris, a 5th grade teacher. At East Rockingham High School, Wendy Vusick, family and consumer science. At Elkton Elementary School, Lisa Lewis, 2nd grade. At Elkton Middle School, Matt Morrow, health and physical education. At Folks Run Elementary School, Amanda Knight, a librarian, pre-K through 5. J. Frank Hilliard Middle School, John Welsh, agriculture education. John C. Myers Elementary School, Jody Clark, pre-kindergarten. John Wayland Elementary School, Kim Mizell, 3rd grade math and reading. Lacey Spring Elementary School, Kim Price, 2nd grade teacher. Linville Edom Elementary School, Christine Akers, kindergarten. Massanutten Technical Center, cosmetology teacher, Ashley Armstrong. At McGackey'sville Elementary School, Irene Huber, special education. Montevideo Middle School, Tracy Myers, 6th through 8th grade. Mountain View Elementary School, Jesse Lass, 3rd grade. Audubon Elementary School, Kelly Liskanek, 4th grade. Peakview Elementary School, Terry Smith, kindergarten. Plains Elementary School, Amelia Guido, art, pre-K through 5. Pleasant Valley Elementary School, Dawn Carcamo, health and physical education. Riverbend Elementary School, Morgan Bulis, language arts, math, science, and social studies. South River Elementary School, Jackie Dunsmore, the school counselor. At Spotswood High School, Christopher Hu, science. Turner Ashby High School, Melissa Talley, marketing teacher. And at Wilbur S. Pence Middle School, Kim Dove, a social studies teacher. Congratulations, certainly from me and from the rest of the staff to these amazing educators. And again, you will always find that the teachers that show compassion and have high expectations at the same time are the ones that are often selected then by students as the Teachers of the Year. And so now it is the time for the president of REFI, a former teacher in Rockingham County and a lifelong educator and lifelong learner, Susie Shomo, to make the presentation of the Teacher of the Year. And so Ms. Shomo, if you have not yet unmuted yourself, please do so.
I can do that. I've become an expert at this for months and months. Okay, the board members of the Rockingham Educational Foundation would like to acknowledge every teacher in Rockingham County Public Schools for their dedication in these challenging times. You are all super. To those Teachers of the Year whose names were just announced by Dr. Scheichel, congratulations to each one of you who stands proudly for education in every school in Rockingham County. A panel of REFI board members read every application and letters of support for each RCPS Teacher of the Year. I have to say that the level of care, passion, and creativity exhibited by these outstanding teachers is nothing short of amazing. A few notable quotes that Katie pulled out for us. Being passionate about what you do shows through to those around you and creates a foundation upon which you can build relationships. When students know you care about them and see that you care about what you do, they are more likely to do what you ask of them. Another quote, students come from varying paths and backgrounds, and it is our responsibility to help them feel self-worth and to encourage them on their learning journey. Another, I believe that a successful learning environment for children begins with students' basic needs being met. Within my classroom, I show my students how much I care for them. Instilling critical thinking skills within lessons is a goal I have for myself and my students. Whole brain learning is also a key element in the successful learning environment that I use in my everyday lessons. And one of my favorites, every child is a success waiting to happen. It takes creating a fun, safe, caring, and exciting environment for them to experience that success. Well, choosing one teacher for the Lucy Sims Educator of the Year Award has been an incredible challenge. Refi wishes to thank the law firm of Bakken Rose for their continued support of the Teacher of the Year program. And the chosen teacher will represent our school division in Region 5 of Virginia's K-12 Teacher of the Year program. Okay, supported by her fellow teachers and administration, it is my great pleasure to acknowledge the 2021 Lucy Sims Educator of the Year, Miss Kim Dove, who teaches social studies at Wilbur Pence Middle School. Yay! We are so proud of you and all of your fellow teachers of the year in Rockingham County Public Schools. And I'd like to close by sharing, which probably most people have heard, my new favorite poem by Dr. Seuss. It fits me to a T, I can tell you. I will teach you in a room. I will teach you now on Zoom. I will teach you in a house. I will teach you with my mouse. I will teach you here or there. I will teach because I care. Thank you all very much. Congratulations. Thank you, school board, for allowing us to be a part of the school board meeting this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Susie. That was wonderful.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Folk.
Next item on the agenda is the 2020-2021 budget review update or revenue update.
So before I begin that presentation, also, I want to congratulate Kim Dove for that honor, and also, of course, all the other teachers of the year and all our teachers, all our educators who have this phenomenal impact on our students. And it is so interesting to see, you know, in a crisis like this, how their creativity comes into play, and how when teachers are allowed to provide creative instruction because there is no standard education, how they shine and how they still connect with students and serve them in many different ways, educationally, and also, you know, acknowledging their needs for caring adults in their life. And so again, congratulations to all the teachers of the year and all our educators. The next topic, the budget revenue update, of course, is also related to the crisis we're currently facing. And when we did a budget presentation earlier in the spring, and the board approved this was already towards the end of March. And we had already said, I presented the budget and said, you know, this will change. This will have to change based on the conversations we have already had with Rockingham County staff at the time, and that we weren't quite sure yet what the impact of the changes would be, but that the original budget request was understood to be a request that was worked on with county staff and then had to be changed, after the fact, after presenting it to the Board of Supervisors because of the current crisis. And so over the last month, we've worked hard to get an understanding of what we may face with the budget for next year. And it is a picture that is troubling when we look at the loss of revenue to the school division. But of course, in all these cases, we work through all the different options that we have to make this work. And in this particular case, as every school division faces this, there's a lot of uncertainty just based on where we receive revenue from and what the impact on that revenue is. This was supposed to be a banner year in Virginia for education. And of course, this came at a really unfortunate time for our education system across the state, really. So before this crisis started, these were some of the items we had in the budget plans. And these were some of the items that the school board approved and that we were hoping to implement. So there was going to be a 2% pay increase for all staff at the cost of approximately $2 million. And a large, a component of that, of course, is state funding, and then our local funding body providing the additional funds. We were also going to implement a correction for a number of classified positions where we felt that those pay scales should be corrected. We had worked on changes to Rockingham Academy with the implementation of a middle school program and additional staff there to support students, particularly in the mental and behavioral health area. And then division-wide, our tiered systems of supports in the area of mental behavioral health. We had plans for 2 Strong Start programs for young elementary students who were unable to function in a regular classroom because of some of the issues that they brought based on some traumatic experiences in their life or other issues that, again, made them unable to participate fully in the regular classroom. And so these Strong Start programs were going to help us, help students in small increments to integrate them into regular classrooms. Behavior assistance at the middle schools, reducing the number of out-of-school suspensions by implementing a high school in-school suspension program, an additional early intervention counselor, and a behavior specialist. In terms of revenue to pay for these initiatives, we had faced a loss in miscellaneous revenue, which was really related to regional tuition. But then what was promising was an increase in state funding of $4.3 million. Federal revenue, we had already expected a loss. Some grant money moving forward. Those were for specific programs that were just running out. And then also we had worked with our local funding body, with the Board of Supervisors and county leadership, with the county administrator and finance director, to increase the local share by $1.875 million for a total budget of just over $145,648,000, which represented about a $3.5 million increase from the school year that we're currently finishing up. And again, that would have allowed us to provide some staff pay raises and then implement a number of other initiatives. Now, what is the impact now of this pandemic? The first big impact had to do with state revenue. So immediately as the General Assembly reconvened to consider changes by Governor Northam, it became clear that the increase in state funding simply was not going to materialize the way it had just been passed shortly before. And so the state share of the pay raise, that amounted to $950,000. That was eliminated. The counselor ratio that was supposed to be improved, that went back to the previous ratio and reduced state funding by $155,000. At-risk add-on money and Virginia preschool initiative funds were reduced by $300,000. And then an enormous number, when you look at it as a single reduction, and that was the anticipated loss in sales tax revenue. And it's really important for everyone to understand that this represents an estimate in how much less we would receive in the next school year from the sales tax. Now, because we don't know what the economy will do and how quickly the economy may recover, this is simply an estimate. And across the state, school districts simply made educated guesses at this number. We had no particular guidance from Richmond about this, because again, this is all based on future sales tax collections. The way we approached it was to look at a study by UVA's Walden Cooper Center that estimated in the more significant scenario of a 6% drop in gross domestic product, anticipated a 7% loss in sales tax revenue compared to the 2019 fiscal year, which already was significantly lower than the projected sales tax for next year. So using that number, which is the only study that we had available, and the researcher was kind enough to share detailed data with us that wasn't really in the published report, we project an anticipated loss, again, based on the more severe model of up to $2.13 million. And so that, of course, has an enormous impact. Locally, in our work with the Board of Supervisors and, again, county leadership, we are continuing to budget with level funding from last year. That was almost clear at the time we passed the budget, as the pandemic had just hit, and that's unchanged. So it is almost $2 million less than what would have been possible had this not happened. But again, we have to add that. And so there is a resulting revenue loss of approximately $5.4 million compared to what was approved. And compared to the budget of the current school year that we're finishing out, that is a reduction by approximately $2 million. There are additional losses in revenue that may happen. For example, the lottery had a 28% decrease of receipts, I believe, in March. And so that is also forecast to potentially be lower. Again, it all depends on the economy and what people spend money on. We have an additional health insurance expense. That is not entirely defined yet, but if at all possible, we would pick up the employee increase at an approximate cost of $600,000. And on the revenue side, as many people are aware, the federal government has provided some stimulus funds, the CARES Act, to school districts, and the funds for Virginia, as in other states, are split up based on Title I students that are in a particular school district. And so our share of the federal stimulus funds amounts to $1,417,685 to be spent within 2 years. And so what we always have to consider here is that that is not simply a replacement of other lost revenue, because the other revenue we lost would have been for ongoing projects. And since this is a one-time revenue stream, of course, we do not want to spend that necessarily on ongoing projects, because then we would not be able to have that money after the stimulus money runs out, similar to what we faced 12 years ago. And so these are the things that we now have to consider, right? We will be $2 million below what the current school year was budgeted with, and $5 million below what we had budgeted for next year. And so the stimulus money can help a little bit with some of that, but not nearly enough. And so what is the impact on the process? We've spent the last few weeks reviewing all budgeted spending items. There are a number of items that we can hold where we can say, we do not have to complete this project early in the school year. And if we can do it later, if sales tax revenue does not decrease by as much as we predict, then that will be possible. But until we have a clear picture of what the sales tax is actually doing, we will hold that spending. The total amount of projected sales tax is still an enormous amount of money. It's $13 million. And so that fluctuation can have a big impact. In terms of open positions, so positions that have not yet been filled, we went through a process of categorizing them based on the level of impact they have on the classroom. And so in the end, this helps us generate a list of priorities. And it is always our intent to protect positions that are directly involved in the classroom. Our pay increases, that is one of the side effects of losing the state personnel supplement, and also leveling out local funding, that the pay increases that we had hoped to provide. And again, this is something every school district is facing because of this. Those have to be postponed. And again, as soon as we're able to, of course, we would help our employees again increase their pay. And so ultimately, again, what we are working on putting together is a clear list of priorities, because if sales tax if that revenue does materialize, then we want to make sure we know what we consider the most important pieces that would then be funded. And if sales tax revenue was even lower than predicted, then we would also, have a list to say, based on our initial conversations, here is what we would do first, and here's what we, would hold off until the very end. So, there are a lot of complex connections. For example, here we talk about, the public comment was about the staggered start times and the shortened school day. If throughout the year we felt comfortable that maybe a year from now we could attempt that, then that would, for example, reduce the number of school buses that may have to be purchased. So we'll wait on that a little bit. Again, a lot of the decisions that will be made down the road will then let us decide, for example, whether budgeted money for school buses can be spent or not. And so, again, all the other items are in conversation as well. And so we hope to make sure that we are ready for revenue impact, whether it's less than what the study predicted, or whether it's more than the study predicted. But it's certainly an uncertain time, and the reopening of the economy, depending on how that goes and how quickly that works and how many jobs will come back to the economy, of course, that all has a huge impact on how much people are able to spend and what that means for sales tax revenue. And so that's the update related to the pandemic that we currently face. It is, of course, not something that we, present to the board and to the public in any kind of, positive way. This is certainly a huge impact, when we talk $5 million compared to what was budgeted. But again, protecting what is direct service to students and making sure that we are responsible and work with our counterparts in the county to ensure that we continue to fund the level of education that our families and the school board and our students expect. And I will entertain any questions from board members if you want to ask any.
Board members, do you have questions for the superintendent?
So, Dr. Scheichel, is everything on the initial list of the pre-COVID-19 budget plans list, is everything on hold?
Well, there are some items, Ms. Lohr, that because of how the state went about eliminating items from the state budget, there are some items that we simply will not have in the budget. So the state, for example, reduced the spending on the new counselor ratio that was going to be put in effect. And so that's money that we know we will not get. And so, so from the original budget, that money can't be spent. There are other items that are, for example, the reduced spending in the at-risk add-on. So some of the items that the state has unallotted, they are certainly theoretically possible for this school year. That also includes, for example, the personnel supplement. But that would be unusual. But if it does materialize, then certainly we have the option of creating a budget amendment. So we're not including those in the budget request. The sales tax, on the other hand, that's a completely unknown. That simply depends on month by month sales tax receipts by the state and then by the locality. So for the sales tax portion, we are leaving the anticipated sales tax, what the state has sent us as the projected sales tax revenue in the budget, but have, of course, an appropriate list to offset that. So if sales tax does drop, then our expenses will also drop. If sales tax, on the other hand, materializes at a higher level than anticipated, then we can then fund some of the items that we were going to use that money for. So it's a mix. Some of it is simply not in the budget and would require a budget amendment if it did materialize. Others, we are holding off on and really hope that sales tax does better, because if the economy recovers more quickly and people are willing to spend money earlier, then the sales tax may not do as well. So for example, the Weldon Cooper Center also ran a scenario where the drop in GDP was only 2%. And so that's, of course, a much lower loss in sales tax revenue as a result. And those were kind of the two boundaries that they set. They expect at least that, and they set the maximum at 6% based on studies in other areas that predict how much the gross domestic product will decrease as a result of this. I hope that answers your question.
Well, can you actually specifically address the correction of classified pay scales? Where are we at with it?
Right. So the classified pay scale, that would have required mostly local money. And so that's simply, unless state revenue for the personnel supplement comes with no strings attached, we would have to have a budget amendment. So if pay were to increase, the way it traditionally works is the state provides the personnel supplement, but that is only the state share of that increase. So when the news media report, for example, a 2% increase for teachers, what it really means is a 2% increase of the state portion of the positions covered in the standards of quality. So there are a lot of positions in Rockingham County schools that aren't covered by the standards of quality. And so if a pay raise is implemented, the state will only give us the money in the personnel supplement if there is a local match. And because the state is not providing us with that, and the locality is also looking at revenue shortfalls compared to what was projected, the local share of that is not there. Now, if the General Assembly were to meet later in the year and look at the personnel supplement being available again because revenue is higher than anticipated, and the conversation would then be with the locality or looking at what strings would be attached at that time, because it's also possible that the state, which they did a couple of decades ago, provide a personnel supplement without a local match requirement, then we can implement that even mid-year. That could be done even as a bonus. If only the state share were to become available, then it could be implemented as a bonus. So yes, those items are certainly remaining on the radar. But in terms of funding those, we would depend on the state revenue for that, and that's not currently available.
Okay, thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions for the superintendent on the budget?
No.
All right, thank you, Dr. Scheichel. Policy revisions.
Good evening, board members and Dr. Scheichel.
Good evening, Dr. Aldifer.
So for obvious reasons, we had suspended our policy revisions over the course of the last month or so. However, we thought we'd get back on the horse with that. So we do have 9 policies for your review this evening and over the next couple of weeks. So they are available for you in board docs for you to take a look at. If you have any questions for me tonight, I'll be happy to answer those, or you can contact me between now and the next meeting. But then we will be bringing these forth for action at our second May meeting. So I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Board members, do you have any questions for Dr. Aldifer about the policy revisions he's recommending?
Well, you know, I can never resist asking Dr. Aldifer about policies.
Even in Zoom, I get questions.
So Dr. Aldifer, most of those policies are in response to changes in VSBA policy
They
or
are.
suggested changes of policy. Okay.
Yeah.
Do
Yes.
we have much coming down the pike for July for from the General Assembly, their work that they did at the beginning of this year too?
Yeah, so
Okay.
I have a webinar with the VSBA coming up in a week and a half, in which they will be outlining all of the new policies. So generally that's quite a few. Usually that's up to 50 revisions that will be happening. So this will likely be our last of the as we're going through this comprehensive review, we'll now start concentrating on the new changes that were made that we will need to make updates on before next school year starts. So the next meeting in June and in July, you'll have another helping of policies to review.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Thank you, Dr. Aldifer. Next item on the agenda is financial review.
Board members, in your materials, you have the financial review for April. And certainly I'm open to any questions, and I can also refer you to Ms. Mast if you want to have a more detailed conversation about any of the items in this with her.
Board members, does anyone have any questions on the financial review?
No.
Okay. Moving into the action items of part of the agenda, the first item is approval of minutes from the last meeting. May I have a motion to that effect?
I move that we approve the minutes as presented for the April 27th meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. May I have a second to that motion?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Breeden. It's been moved and properly seconded. Is there any discussion regarding the minutes as presented? Hearing none, please cast your vote. Passes unanimously. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is payment of bills. We have need to pay our invoices for April. May I have a motion to approve the bills to be paid?
I move that we approve the April 2020 bills as presented.
Thank you, Dr. McQuilkin. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. It's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions about the bills for April? Hearing none, please cast your vote.
Mrs. Laura, okay.
Passes unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Bocock. Authorization of signatures in absence of superintendent 2020-2021 school year.
Yes. Yep. So this is an annual authorization of the signature in absence of the division superintendent. This applies to Virginia Department of Education reports, documents, requisitions, and other official correspondence in case the division superintendent is absent. And I recommend that Dr. Douglas Aldifer and Ms. Cheryl Mast are approved to sign in the absence of the division superintendents. I recommend approval of this authorization.
Board members, we have a recommendation by the superintendent. May I have a motion?
Move that we accept the superintendent's recommendation for authorization of signatures in his absence.
Thank you, Mr. Breeden. Is there a second?
Second,
Thank you, Dr. McQuilkin. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Do you have any questions, board members? Hearing none, please cast your vote. Passes with unanimous approval. AP World History Textbook Adoption Committee.
So we have Mr. Bo Dickinson, our social studies supervisor, in the meeting to present the AP World History Textbook Adoption Committee.
Hello, it's good to see everybody in spite of the circumstances. It's good to see other faces, hear other voices. So Chair Folk, Dr. Scheichel, and members of the board. First, I have to give a shout out to Mrs. Dove. That's quite exciting news. Our Lucy Sims Teacher of the Year, one of our civics teachers. I just wanted to say how impressed I have been with her teaching. She came to us not as a new teacher, but as more of a veteran teacher in the middle of her career from Augusta County, and has just done a wonderful job. And in terms of distance learning, actually kind of led the way in our civics department. And as you know, this is a census year. She developed a distance learning curriculum guide for teachers to implement about the census and its importance, particularly in these difficult circumstances. So very excited to have her recognized at that level in the county. In terms of Lucy F. Sims, Dr. Scheichel shared the book, which is hot off the presses. We look forward to getting each of you a copy of that. Many of you had on your calendars the event that we did have scheduled for this Thursday as a book release, which of course is not happening. We are looking, you could pencil in September 22nd if events prove possible that we're able to meet, which I am optimistic that we will be able to, and certainly hopeful for that event to be able to gather and actually have that formal book release and community event at the Sims Center. That date is historic in and of itself. That was the day, a few days after the Battle of Antietam, that President Lincoln for the first time issued a preliminary Emancipation Proclamation. Given that that had such a profound impact upon Miss Sims' life, we thought that that date would be fitting. So you can pencil that in on your calendars and hope we'll be able to see each other. In terms of my items this evening, I have two actually. There's two textbook adoption committees. I thought I'd just give you a rundown of both. One, of course, is a new course, AP Modern World History, and one is an existing course, which is our AP Government course. I certainly want to say that I'm cognizant of current budget outlooks and concerns, and certainly don't want to be seemingly insensitive to the need to, of course, manage resources. However, I would also say that I would want to be proactive in preparing for next fall. And I would say these two courses would be the ones that I would deem most necessary in terms of textbook resources as being essential. These two courses are unique in terms that one is a new course, of course, that we would have the need for a textbook, being that it's new. And the other is a pre-existing AP course where our digital textbook subscription will expire this summer. So that compels us to either renew that subscription or look at a new textbook. And the government teachers, including myself, thought it would be prudent to look at other resources, given the fact that the current one doesn't really align as well as we would like it to with the changes to the AP test. The cost of seeking a new textbook versus renewing would essentially be the same. So that's why we're pursuing that course of action. Both committees are composed of teachers, parents, and students who have confirmed a willingness to review textbooks at home. We understand it's very difficult and unforeseen circumstances because we started this process in late February, starting to put feelers out and talk to people. And then, of course, the world changed. So in speaking with parents and students and teachers, we have said that we would ship them, mail them the textbooks. They could complete an online textbook evaluation form that I developed, and then we would meet via a conference call, not a Zoom meeting, but a conference call where we could all speak to one another while remaining sheltered in place. I can now answer any questions you may have.
Board members, do you have questions for Mr. Dickinson?
Mr. Dickinson, I understand that you will be securing a person for the AP World History Textbook Adoption Committee from the Broadway area. Is that correct?
That's correct. So you may have noticed that there's not 4 teachers listed on that one. The background, very briefly, is that the teacher who was teaching the course that we're replacing has left the school division, and we're in the process of hiring a replacement that I believe is pending. So as soon as that person is approved, I'll involve them in the process.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you, Mr. Dickinson, for the report, and thank you very much for the work that your team is doing.
Thank you.
So I do recommend approval of the 2 committees as presented by Mr. Dickinson, the AP World History Textbook Adoption Committee and the AP Government and Politics Textbook Adoption Committee.
Okay. We have a recommendation by the superintendent. May I have a motion?
I move that we accept superintendent's recommendation on the AP World History Textbook Adoption Committee and the AP Government and Politics Textbook Adoption Committee.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. It's been properly moved. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and properly seconded. Thank you, Ms. Lohr. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please cast your vote. You're in business, Mr. Dickinson.
Thank you, sir.
2020-2021 salary scales.
Yes, so as a result of the conversation earlier, of course, as we talked about the impact of the pandemic on state and local funding, the impact on salary scales is that salary scales will remain the same as they were during the current school year, the 1920 school year. And so those salary scales in your materials are for your approval. And again, they reflect that change in salary for next year. And so again, those are salary scales that will pay every employee the same amount next year as it does this year.
We have a recommendation by the superintendent. May I have a motion?
Move that we accept the superintendent's recommendation as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. And may I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the salary scales? I would just like to say that I think the board and the executive team for the school division all agree that this is, it's sad because we had such high hopes to make up ground this year. And unfortunately, we're not going to be able to do that. And so I know it's in everybody's mind and heart to do the best we can from this point forward. But if there's no other discussion, please cast your vote. Passes unanimously. The 2020,
Chair
2021. Yes.
Chair Folk, I just want to correct it. The vote was 4-1 by what I see,
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
just to clarify that.
Yes. Well, thank you. Next on the agenda is school calendar for 2020, 2021 school year.
So the school calendar was for your information at the last meeting, and Dr. Shiflett will present it for action tonight.
Good evening, Chair Folk, members of the board, Dr. Scheikel. At our last meeting, I did present you with a draft proposal for the 2020-2021 school calendar, and I'd like to come back this evening, answer any questions you may have about that draft, and seek your approval for that calendar.
Thank
I
you.
recommend approval of the calendar as presented by Dr. Shiflett.
We have a recommendation by the superintendent to approve the calendar for next school year as presented by Dr. Shiflett. May I have a motion to that effect?
I move that we follow the superintendent's recommendation to approve the 2021 school calendar as presented by Larry Shiflett.
Thank you, Ms. Lohr. May I have a second to that motion?
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Does anyone have any questions for Dr. Shiflett?
So in the event that we can't start with a normal start, how does that work with the calendar? Does that make sense what I'm asking?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, we set the date. I think it's what, Tuesday, August the 25th. But in the event that we can't open then, we'll have to come back to to the school board and ask for, you know, an amendment to the calendar. And then we may have to look at our days and make some changes based on what we're facing. You know, right now it's just everything's just so uncertain. But yeah, this is the calendar, you know, as of today moving forward. But we may have to make some modifications, whether that's looking at changing work days or adding days or whatever, because we just don't know what to expect with this pandemic.
And then is there a possibility to start
Any
any earlier, perhaps with some summer school? Did that come through?
Well, we are planning. Yes, ma'am. We are planning to offer summer school. High school will start, I believe it's June 13th, and because they have a longer extended summer school, they're either taking, you know, some students are taking new courses. Some of them will be doing credit recovery. And then for our elementary and middle schools, they'll have summer school from July 13th to July 31st. So hopefully we can make up some ground there. Again, if we're allowed to bring students into the schoolhouse and, you know, have them congregate in groups of whatever we're allowed, 10 or less, 50 or more. We don't know yet. Really anxious to see how phase one of reopening goes and how long that takes. So absolutely, yeah, this calendar could end up coming back and reconvening and trying to make some changes based on what's happening. But we are going to do some hopefully we'll get some summer school. I'm trying to be an optimist and think that's what's going to happen, but we'll have to wait and see. You hear all sorts of different rumors about what may happen. So yeah.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions for Dr. Shiflett about the calendar? No. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we've had a motion and a second and discussion. Please cast your vote. And this time it's unanimous. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Other business, school board questions, answers? Again, I'll start with Ms. Lohr.
I have no questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Breeden.
I would just ask for clarification because I've been asked once or twice, as the decision is reached on graduations, is that something that the board will act upon, or is that something that's made at the decision that's made at the executive level?
So, Mr. Breeden, the graduation dates typically are set by the schools. There has always been an effort to during times when we don't have to worry about how many people can be in the building. There's always been an effort to have them staggered so that board members and others, can attend all the graduations if they so desire. The MTC graduation is usually held separately earlier. And so in this particular case, the date that is set for a graduation certainly would be part of a conversation, but it's not typically something that requires a board vote. And so just to clarify how the process has worked here, we don't really know what type of graduation we may be able to have. So for example, if Governor Northam does declare this Friday that Virginia will use the phased plan where during phase one, there's still, strong limits on how many people can be in an area, then certainly phase one with only 10 people allowed changes what would be possible. And so some school districts like Louisa County, they've conducted graduations where all students, get to walk across the stage at the building, but it's only one student in the area at the time. And so it takes 4 or 5 days for a single school to complete that process. But that is really sometimes the only option other than a virtual graduation when you can only have 10 people. If we do reach phase two, it would be 50 people. That doesn't change it fundamentally. You still can't have a regular graduation. And then of course it would require phase three where all these limits, in terms of the number of people are lifted to have a regular graduation. This past Tuesday, in the weekly call with State Superintendent James Lane, we were advised that phase three may happen, in all likelihood, would not happen until early August at the earliest. And so waiting until then, because we wouldn't really know, it all depends on how many new cases there are, what the ability to test and trace and isolate, what that ability is. And so it's difficult to wait until then. So what we have done in the meantime is to look at 2 alternatives that are possible, and that Department of Education, has also talked about. And that is, one is, again, this slower process of having a school graduate over the course of 4 or 5 days at the actual facility. Those really are difficult later in the summer. Some schools, want to have outside graduation in that case, and July or August is difficult there. But the other option that is possible is really based on something that happened Easter Sunday. So there was a church service, I believe, at the fairgrounds where people were able to drive up and have the cars at least at the facility. And so there's one plan that would allow potentially families to come to a location, and all of them would be there, but they would be required, because of social distancing, if it is in effect, to remain in their cars. And typically radio stations could participate in that by broadcasting the speeches and the different components over the radio so that people can listen in. And then students and their families would drive up to receive the diploma. And with that, we would have more time. So at this point, we haven't set a graduation date. I know there have been some questions about that. At this point, we've asked students which of the seniors, which of the 2 options they would prefer. And if it is the drive-in graduation of those alternatives, then that would give us a couple of weeks to really see what happens in phase one. And so if phase one truly were to last only 2-3 weeks, it may be possible to wait and see and say, okay, let's hold off if that's the desire, and see how that progresses. Because again, it all depends on what numbers VDH sees, Department of Health, and what the governor decides as a result. So there has not been a graduation date set, and it's only with the longer ones that it makes more sense to do it at the traditional time. But for the other options, that's not been set, and that certainly would be a conversation, but it doesn't typically rise to the level where the board votes on implementation of graduation time. But it's certainly part of the conversation.
Thank you for clarifying that.
You're welcome.
Ms. Reed.
Thank you, Mr. Falk. Thank you to Refi for their continued support and for really highlighting our teachers today and making it as special as we can right now, and look forward to celebrating later this year in the fall with those teachers. Refi's support has been really important to the Rockingham County school system through all the awards and the grants and the gift cards that they provide us for the awards that we have at our different meetings. And so I'm very appreciative of their efforts. And I know that if there's any opportunities that we have to continue that they are willing to help support as we look at what life is going to look like for the next few months. So special thanks to them, to Ms. Lapira and Ms. Shomo for their efforts for our teachers. It's greatly appreciated. I have to echo what Mr. Falk said about the disappointment in really where we thought we were going to be about salaries and salary levels. That's really being felt across the board with every business and government entity here in this area. And we were just about at the top of the hill and the rope sort of slipped a little bit. And so we kind of slid down, but fingers crossed that we can make up that ground eventually and really focus on those pay scales that we wanted to focus on this time. I mean, I think right now it's important for us all to continue to be resilient and to be as nimble as we can and pivot every time a new decision's made or a new obstacle comes up. And I think that Rockingham County Schools is well poised to do that. So I'm proud of the work that everybody's doing to kind of move us forward as best as we can. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. Dr. McQuilkin.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Falk. In light of all that has happened in the meeting today, I would like to thank our staff, every single employee, for working together and working for the students. It certainly is not something we've done before. However, we are doing it, and we're doing it well with the students in mind, and I'd like to thank everybody for their efforts.
Thank you, Dr. McQuilkin. Dr. Scheichel.
Yeah, I want to echo that. I think, again, it takes an entire community. It takes a school board that is flexible, just as our board of supervisors has to be flexible in what is possible at a given time. And it's encouraging, when we see community members and families respond about, the impact that teachers and other school staff, counselors, principals, food service staff, custodians, the volunteers to help with food distribution, and the impact that they have on the families in the community. And so I want to thank everyone for, again, stepping up during a time that's certainly unprecedented. And this is where the community gets closer. And yeah, in terms of the budget, of course, that's really difficult. And again, it's in classified advisory, we've talked every meeting, when can we make some adjustments? And that would be something that, if the money becomes available, we can consider. But again, everything that we had planned to add to the system has to be reviewed. And so those are decisions that no one wants to make. We were barely getting back to state funding the way it was before the Great Recession in 2008. And before that can even be implemented, we're right back millions of dollars lower. So it's really unfortunate timing, but a virus doesn't care about our budget situation. But thank you to the board and to all the staff and community members.
Thank you, sir. I'd just like to say that I continue to be very heartened and impressed by our educators in Rockingham County and how they have put together in an emergency time lesson plans and curriculum and reaching out to the students and continuing education as best they can in a time when we can't be around each other. So they've been adapting and modifying and just doing a wonderful, wonderful job. And I'd like to congratulate you, Dr. Scheichel, and your team for, again, for outstanding work.
Thank
We
you.
now have need to enter into closed meeting. May I have a motion?
I move that the board enter into a closed meeting to discuss and consider the following pursuant to provisions of Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A1, personnel, specific public officers, appointees, or employees for the purpose of considering such individuals' assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, salary, or resignation.
Thank you, Ms. Lohr. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. Been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? I will point out that you have been given a link to enter the closed meeting. We will need to leave this open meeting, and I think the superintendent will keep it working. And then after we have held our closed meeting, we will exit that and come back into this public session. Board members,
That's
please
correct.
cast your vote. It's unanimous. We are now in closed meeting.
Looks like we have everyone.
Right. We are back in open meeting. We have need to certify that the only things discussed in our closed session were what we went into closed session to discuss. May I have a motion to certify?
I move to certify to the best of each member's knowledge that only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting requirements under Virginia Freedom of Information Act were discussed in the closed meeting to which the certification applies, and two, only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered by the school board.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Lohr. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please cast your vote.
Isn't this a roll call?
Oh, yes, it truly is.
Thank you, Mrs. Reed. Charlotte McQuilkin,
You're muted, Charlotte.
we'll come back to Dr. McQuilkin. Dan Breeden,
Aye.
Jackie Lohr,
Aye.
Lowell Falk,
Aye.
Renee Reed,
Aye.
Charlotte McQuilkin.
Aye.
Thank you.
Passes unanimously. Thank you. Dr. Scheickel, you have a recommendation on personnel?
I do recommend approval of the personnel listing dated May 11th, 2020, and the supplemented dated May 11th, 2020.
We have a recommendation on personnel by the superintendent. May I have a motion?
I move we accept the superintendent's recommendation regarding personnel.
Thank you, Dr. McQuilkin. The chair will second that motion. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please cast your vote. It passes unanimously. I hereby call this meeting adjourned.